Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Crowper with the one and only Sean Hall. Sean, say
Uh,
hello.
Hello.
There's Sean saying hello. And me, Tim Appleton. Today we shall be looking at, what did we say? It was the ninth Genesis studio album, and then there were three, and which came out in 1978. This is what, as the title indicates, the band had slimmed down by this point to three members, and we'll probably have talk about that a little bit as we go. I think we're going to start with our sort of general opinions of the album, as we are wont to do. Now, I mean, I think I'll kick it off if you like, Sean. I find that a lot of Genesis fans strongly dislike this album, which I think perhaps because I suggested that we have a look at this one, and I think it's that's the imp of the perverse in me. But the fact that people dislike it so much means I feel like discussing it. But I should say that I should say up front that I love this album. I'm a big fan of this album. I suspect that you're not, but we'll tease that out. That'll become clear fairly quickly, I would think. But I do really love this album. I'll probably have to explain why a little bit. I mean, I would say perhaps that this is the least sort of experimental or progressive album, possibly in Genesis's history. Might be a close run thing, but I think later on they did sort of, even like on the most poppy albums, the later ones, Invisible Touch, We Can't Dance, they did very long tracks. And this is the album where they seem to have put all of that in, the sort of long experimental tracks in suspension for a while. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, speaking for myself. Again, I think it depends on your perspective. I mean, from my point of view, for example, I think this is a better album, and I realise this may be controversial. I think this is a better album than Wind and Wuthering. Wind and Wuthering is quite experimental, and I think really it might slightly depend on whether you like sort of experimentalism, kind of for experimentalism's sake. Wind and Wuthering is quite experimental, but I don't think it's a particularly strong album in terms of material. I think the material, the sort of material elements, if you like, are sort of stronger here. There's lots of great hooks and tunes, but I think it's probably, you could perhaps say, the worst you could say about it is it's a bit more one note, as an overall package. I mean, I do wonder what Steve Hackett's influence meant here, whether the absence of Hackett was important at that level. I'm not sure how much influence he had on the band. In terms of contributing song ideas, we know it was, a point of contention. But the very title of this album might give us a clue, perhaps, as to the fact that his influence, certainly at the level of experimentalism, might have been more important than at first appears, and perhaps they recognise that as well. What do you think about the whole deal, Sean?
I always think, this album for me, it's almost like a goodbye to their traditional band sound. It is a much more accessible album, I think, than a lot of the Genesis albums in their catalogue. You've got slightly more contribution, songwriting wise, from Phil Collins.
Right.
It's a funny album because I think it shifts some of the subject matter. It shifts on its axis towards America a little bit. I think with some of the tracks. It's a wintry themed album in parts as well. And I I wrote here it's Steve Hackett's absence. As you said, I mean, it's difficult to know what he contributed in a songwriting style. I mean, he did, I think tracks I've mentioned before on Wind and Wuthering, I like Blood on the Rooftops. But I think it's almost an album that's slightly haunted by his absence. I think Mike Rutherford plays some excellent guitar, but I think at this point they're maybe getting together. I mean, Tony Banks wrote some of the guitar parts, and they're sort of thinking, what might Steve have played? I get that feeling. It's slightly Hackett-esque, I would say, in a way that, say, Duke and the later albums aren't. So,
do you think that they said to him, Steve Hackett's going, and he just said, "All right, screw it, give me the guitar, I'll play it instead." You know.
well, it shows what good all-round musicians they were, because I think they have a pretty good stab at it. I think Tony Banks admitted that perhaps they didn't quite have the finesse of Steve Hackett at the minute, and maybe he's like a gloss overcoat that you brush him on and you get some magic. But I do think this is a good album, and for me personally, it's probably an album. It's probably one of the last Genesis albums I like, and I'll put on quite happily. I'll tell you my Genesis anecdote later on. I'll save that. But,
so stay tuned for that, everybody.
It's a pretty good album, if not a classic, in my opinion.
Right. I mean, I think perhaps we could say, I don't know, the packaging seems a little bit poor. I mean, let's go on to the cover, I suppose. But before we get to the cover, just to say, I mean, I think the cover for me, combined with, because I think it's a bit sort of, it's something abstract about the cover, and the fact that the album is packaged as Then There Were Three, you know, like, so the new theme is all, you know, Wind and Wuthering is kind of a nice title for an album, isn't it? A trick of the tail, even, I suppose. But like, and Then There Were Three is just a reference to the band's biography, you know. It's a bit, you know, people say meta these days, don't they? But it's not really meta. It's just purely self-referential. And like, who cares, you know, like, you know, it's really like, oh, you've lost one of the road crews left or whatever, you know, like who you know, why would anyone care about that at a sort of like artistic level, you know what I mean? And I was going to say, I thought the cover sort of doesn't help with that really, because I think it's slightly conceptually weak or vague. Do you want to talk about, should we do a Hall's Gallery? Do you want to talk about the cover?
A Hall's Gallery. Well, it's Hypnosis, of course. And it's the credits are for Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell. I don't think it's, as you say, not a terribly successful cover. Storm Thorgerson said it's trying to tell a story through, you know, it uses a sort of time lapse photography on the sort of the light trails on the cover. Storm Thorgerson said that it's meant to tell a story of absence through the fading light trails, but I sort of think he's quite good at making up ideas after the artwork has actually been made, and I think it's the sort of thing that perhaps artists do with time. I'm not quite sure. I wonder whether it's one they pulled out of a drawer and said, "Do you like this? You know, this is quite cool. It's got some, you know, we were mucking about with the timings on the camera settings, you know." Yeah. So I don't know. But it's not awful. It's not an awful cover. It's not a disgusting one like. Can I say Invisible Touch? You know, it's like something that some of their album covers look like they've just sort of thrown up on them. I think some of their later ones. So
they look like 1980s wallpaper catalogues.
Yeah, they do. They do. And of course, the important thing is that sort of Lamb Lies Down Greek lettering sort of font where, you know, there's three letters picked out, and I suppose it's meant to be showing that's the band and the others are all fading away. Yeah, it's all right. It's not a fantastic album cover, I'd say. Right,
yeah. I think the metaphor of absence, that's a reference to Steve Hackett, is it? This is an album cover about Steve Hackett? Or did they just pull it out of a drawer and then retroactively justify it by saying it happened to be about Steve Hackett? Yeah. Although, to be fair, I think you'd agree. You're an artist, Shaun, so you would agree that perhaps the nature of the artistic act can only be retroactively interpreted anyway. You know, it's not something you can really plan in advance, is it? You know, you do something good and you think, oh, that's good, but I often think that artists are just like the first people to be taken by surprise by the artistic invention that they've authored, you know. I mean, I associate this album cover with The Plains of America You know, I think partly because some of the songs are about America, aren't they, on this album? I mean, I sort of wondered whether they're sort of trying to got half an eye on the American market, or I think perhaps it could an alternative title for this album might have been selling America by the pound. But I think that the cover sort of ties in with that. I would say there's a sort of it's got a sort of prairie feel, hasn't it? I think. Yeah. All right, lovely. Well, good. Okay, well, look, let's go to the tracks because that's the bread and butter, isn't it? Track number 1, side 1, is Down and Out. Right. Now, this track, my first thing I wrote down about this track is it's in 5/4, 5/4 time signature. And I would say it's very in 5/4, isn't it? This track. I've noted down this song is almost as much in 5/4 as Dave Brubeck's Take 5 is in 5/4. What I mean by that is it's a bit prosaic. This track, I find it's a little bit like a writing exercise. It's not my favourite track on the album, actually. I think it sort of works, qua writing exercise. It works, but I don't think it's the most sort of enlivening Genesis track. I think doesn't really. I don't know if you remember, they used to discuss Genesis a lot, the fact that they would write musical material and then they would get pissed off because Peter Gabriel would come in and sing over the top of it, and they would say, well, this bit doesn't need vocals or whatever. I mean, that's the case with this one, I think. This is I don't know if you noticed this, but this track actually doesn't need the vocals, really. They're sort of ornamental. The tune that Phil is singing is not adding anything, to the piece. So the only bit that's the exception to that is when that interlude where he goes, I don't talk round corners, that bit. That is a vocal passage, right? But that's just an interlude, So I think this has to be taken almost as like one of Genesis's quasi-instrumental tracks, constructed in the studio between the three of them, and then who's going to write the lyric, who's going to write the tune, So yeah, it's sort of a quasi-instrumental, really. This one, I think it's not the best quasi-instrumental they ever wrote, but it's not terrible. What are your feelings on this one?
I think it's. I don't know. I think it's a really good opener for the album. I mean that drum pattern. I mean is great, and I think Phil's. It's almost like he's playing for his life a little bit on this track. They struggled to replicate it live. I noted down. I think Chester Thompson vetoed it. He said, I just can't do this. Can't keep it. It's like a horse galloping off,
Weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you would think
strange.
Chester Thompson, like one of his sort of like characteristics as a musician is that he could play anything, really.
Yeah, it's maybe it's a bit unwieldy. I don't know. It's strange. I put down there's a sort of stabbing guitar riff from Mike Rutherford, which slightly reminded me of passages on The Lamb. I'm trying to think of which song it is, but again, a little bit of a haunting from Steve Hackett. I think Colin's vocals though are really good. He's got a slightly more of an edge on his voice on this album. He starts to develop his voice a bit, doesn't he? Where I think Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering, it's a little bit softer, would you say? He starts to get a bit more, maybe smoking cigarettes or something, I don't know. Not that we condone that at all. But, I think it's pretty good. It's a good opener. Banks has got a great synth solo at the end. And it sort of winds down into the next track. I think it's a good opener. I think it's, we're back, after the autumnal sludge of Wind and Wuthering.
Yeah, that's right. Now we're out on the plains. I know, Phil's voice is more confident, isn't he? You're right about that, I think, at this point. And I know exactly what you mean about the thing on The Lamb. I've got my guitar here because I was going to play a couple of things tonight, if I can. He does this thing, Mike Rutherford does this thing, doesn't he, where he goes from the root to the fifth to the octave. So he goes... that sort of thing. I can't
Yeah.
quite remember how he's playing it, but he does a lot of that on the lamb, but on the bass,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
on In the Cage and things like that. So yes, that point's well taken. Yeah, it's quite sort of. You're right. It's quite full on, isn't it? This track. It's quite rocky, actually. The lyrics. I mean, a lot of the lyrics on this album are sort of, take them or leave them. I find. I do think that whatever you think about, like Peter Gabriel and the Gabriel era versus the Phil era, I think that Peter Gabriel was probably the best lyricist in the band, I would say. That's what I feel personally, at least. The lyrics here, do you know what they seem to be about a record executive or a businessman who's got a sort of Hobbesian, view of life, state of nature, war of all against all, which is quite a common ideology today, really, sort of libertarianism, I suppose, follows that. It goes along those lines, and so it almost seems to have a slight political philosophical edge. This track, I don't know whether you had that feeling as well.
No, I
You just ignored the lyrics.
I ignored the lyrics and listened to the music.
Well, that just proves my hypothesis that the lyrics are not that important on this. The singing's not that important on this track. All right, good. What do you think about Undertow, second track?
Yeah, well, it's a contrast from it, isn't it? It's a bit of a romantic song. I think it's quite a romantic album, actually. Bit more accessible. Bit more. I think this is the Genesis album where maybe the ladies start to take more interest in the band. So again, it's a sort of it's a winter song, isn't it? Wind from the northeast chills the air. It's got a sort of glorious chorus, isn't it? Lay down on the ground, let me live again, seize the day, kind of. Lyrics, and it's about finding comfort in someone else. I think really. I think it's Banks, isn't it? Wrote this, yeah. I think he actually managed to write a decent ballad here, and he was conscious, I think, after Wind and Wuthering, he didn't want to do another one for the Vine, so I think he lopped a bit off the length of this song. So well done, Tony.
Well done, Tony.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you explained the lyric. I find the lyric inexplicable here. I think it's supposed to be existentialist, but it just ends up being romantic and vaguely religious, doesn't it? But are you saying it's a love song, you think?
I think so, yeah, I think so.
Well, I would say that this is... I really like this track. I love this track, really. I think that it's... where do we begin here? Some unusual... It's quite characteristic, this song, I think, of the album and of Tony Banks' writing in this period, and Tony Banks' writing in general, actually. It's got sort of... unusual things happening in the verse, the syncopated opening line. You got very unusual chord changes. I often think you have to be a keyboard player to think of these sort of lateral chord changes, and of course key changes, because it starts in E and then moves to A and then back to E for the end at the end of the line. So it's sort of it's kind of like key changes, and the key changes are sort of continuous. But I think that, like, a lot of these sort of effects are sort of unusual, but without being specifically interesting. Because I think that, again, talking about being an artist, Shaun, as you will know, in art, all interesting things are unusual, but not all unusual things are interesting, if you know what I mean. In other words, like, unusual developments are kind of a necessary but insufficient condition for art. So you get things which are unusual, but that doesn't necessarily make them interesting. So I think that the line sort of trundles along without anything especially interesting happening until the very end. And I think the end of the line here, because it's a whole sequence that they basically repeat twice, and the resolution of everything is sort of unexpected, but also interesting. And it's interesting in it's sort of like, Christians talk about like the second coming. Like if you just wait long enough, something miraculous happens at the end. And actually, the interesting part here, I think, has a very sort of specific thing, and I'll tell you what it is. This is why I got the guitar, because I thought it was worth mentioning this, because it's the same. Ironically, it's the same singularly interesting thing that happens on several of these tracks, and it's a first inversion chord basically. So they're in E, right? Let's say, and then the second chord is A, but what they're doing is they're playing the A as a first inversion. Now, the first inversion means that, if you're in A, then first inversion means that the lowest note is the third note of the scale, and then the second inversion is like the lowest note is the fifth of the scale, but it's the same chord, right? So it's that in the bass. That's what makes it interesting. It's a very technical thing, but I mentioned it because it comes up in a few of these tracks, and I wanted to sort of keep coming back to it. So we can let's stand up to the glow, la 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 la. That bit I think is beautiful, and that makes the whole of the rest of the line work. If that bit wasn't there, this wouldn't be an interesting song in my view, and it also wouldn't be an interesting song if they went da 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 da. If they just play the A straight rather than as an inversion. So anyway, these are sort of slightly keyboardy things, because I think keyboardists work with inversions more than guitar players do, because keyboardists don't like to move their hands very much. Basically, that's how they operate. Whereas a guitarist is always like, So yeah, that's my gambit there. I think that's the highlights. I think my conclusion is that this song is like Afterglow if it had been good. But yeah, I'll come back to that later on. That sort of first inversion thing. What about Ballad of Big?
Yeah, Ballad of Big. It's sort of the first of the sort of Americana songs, and this stems from Phil's obsession with the Wild West, and he's an avid collector of Alamo memorabilia, wasn't he? I probably still is. Apparently, I read that Mike Rutherford rubbed his guitar strings with pieces of metal to give an Eastern sound. Well, I thought, what's the bloody point of that? It's about the Wild West, isn't it? Unless he's talking about the Chinese railroaders or something. I don't really get that. I mean, maybe if there's an American list, might better help me. But anyway, it's okay. I can sort of take it or leave it, but I don't know how essential it is on this album. This is the first song where I don't mind it. The playing's good, but I think I might have preferred a different song. It reminds me a little bit, maybe, of it. It feels slightly unwieldy in the sense maybe the Battle of Epping Forest for me is a slightly unwieldy track. It's obviously clearly written for the American ear. Although we're all fascinated with the Wild West, aren't we, in Britain? I think a lot of people are.
I think that everyone is, aren't they?
Yeah, and of course the native Indians, the Plains Indians, are referred to as an all-star Indian tribe, aren't they? Hooting and a hollering. So it's an okay track. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I really like this one. I think that this is maybe not a classic Genesis track, but I think it really works in this context, and I think this album is really well programmed. Apparently they had a different running order originally, and then they changed it at the last minute. I think this track might have been on side 2. I'm not completely sure about that, but I think that this is the right sort of track for this point, And again, all these tracks are sort of relatively short, so they're doing at least for the moment, So they're sort of thinking about how the album is programmed, I think, in a sort of more in-depth way than perhaps they would do normally, because they normally put literally less songs on the albums, So I think that this one kind of works. The interesting thing here, again, talking about what's interesting versus what's unusual, is that the song, of course, contains a time change, right? That's the interesting thing, with a capital I. It goes from a fast sort of 6/8 to a straight 4/4 beat, and that 4/4 beat kind of crashes in, and they're not really related meters. I don't think. I think they just kind of like crashed them together. And it's not a subtle shift, but it's not intended to be, you know. And I think it works quite well. It's kind of unusual, unexpected, unusual, but also interesting, you know. They're also, I noticed they're playing they're all playing all the time on this one. You know, it reminds me of the more prog era in that sense, you know. Even though the structure itself is quite succinct. You know, or it sounds like almost like Trick of the Tail, or you know, or even like Yes, a little bit. It's a full band construction and performance. This one, isn't it? And I think, you know, that's one of the things perhaps people like about prog bands is that they, you know, they function as bands, not as so much as virtuosos, or not virtuosos all the time, you know. And so I think that sort of structural feature is kind of interest to prog fans probably. And so I think this sort of satisfies that you know, criterion, as it were. But I agree with you. The lyric is not great, is it? Again, it's about America. This is supposed to be. Well, again, the lyric's not great. Probably doesn't matter too much, you know. It's supposed to be a sort of mythical story, is it? But it's not. It's not clear what it's about. It's a sheriff who gets challenged in a bar and then killed by Native American warriors, so he haunts the plains. I mean, what
is this a true story, American listener? If we've got one,
we do have American listeners on the podcast, actually. Please
put us out of our misery.
I shouldn't this is like the bit in what's it called, The Wizard of Oz, where they pull the curtain back at the end. Actually, the vast majority of our listeners on the podcast are from America. But shouldn't say that perhaps. But anyway, yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, I think it's an Americana thing, but yeah, is it a popular American myth? I doubt it. And also some of the expressions are a bit rushed, aren't they? I've written one down here. The weather was hard, but so were the men. I don't think even Big will try this trip again.
Yeah, it doesn't quite scan, does it? I don't know. It's
you know, again, the absence of Peter Gabriel is never more keenly felt, I think, at this point.
Right, stick to writing about what you know, Phil. Divorce.
Good point.
Marital breakup.
What about Snowbound then?
Snowbound. Well, it's another winter song. Obviously, the clue's in the title. Another romantic song with an utterly ridiculous lyrics, in my opinion, about a man who wears a snowman suit and can't get out and gets buried in snow or something, doesn't he? But actually, the lyric, you know, a snow year is a good year filled with the love of all who lie so deep. It's quite romantic, isn't it? I quite like that.
Very romantic, though.
Yeah, very romantic. You know, the hey, there's a snowman. That's, you know, lighters in the air sort of stuff. But I kind of like this. It's a guilty pleasure song for me. I think it's quite it's a beautiful tune and arrangement. So
absolutely,
I like it. I like it.
Should it have been called? Because presumably it should have been called The Snowman, right? But
yeah,
that was too on the nose. I don't know. I mean,
somebody had already done it.
Somebody had already done it, right? Raymond Briggs.
Maybe it was that.
But I mean, I don't know. He called it Snowbound to sort of imply that it was a metaphor, but you know, or it had some sort of metaphorical element. Yeah. But it doesn't. It's just about making a snowman, isn't it? You know,
it reminds me a bit of if you eat too many eggs, you can become egg bound, can't you? You have too many hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like he's forgotten. What I was going to say was, it's like he's forgotten that a metaphor has to be a metaphor. You know, but yeah, I think you're right. This is a nice track, isn't it? I really love this track. At this point, I get a great sense of joy. You know, because I thought we're 4 for 4 here. I just think this is such a beautiful run of tracks, and I don't know, people don't like this album, do they? Genesis fans. It's not very well remembered, not least by the band themselves. But I think it's a really strong set. But as I said before, it's not very experimental, is it? A lot of some of the weirdness has been, the weird edges have been knocked off. But this is just a really great song, I think, which is not an easy thing to do, to write such a great song. It's so good, this one, that it almost makes me forget Your Own Special Way. It makes me forgive him for Your Own Special Way. So good. I've written it could have almost made it onto Small Creeps Day, which I still haven't done a solo episode about. But again, interesting chord changes for a guitarist. I've written so good they could have been written by a keyboard player. And again, parallel with Undertow, because there's sort of, again, it's well programmed, this, because this is a sort of like echo of Undertow for the first ballad. It's got like some a key change in it, and it ends again. Sorry to do this, but hey, there's a snowman. That first inversion again. And again, that's what makes the tune, actually. That harmony is what makes it interesting to listen to, I think. I'm just occasionally going to get my guitar and play a first inversion and put it down. So yeah, I think this shows that they were influencing each other. I think this is sort of like Mike Rutherford, under the the sort of standing temporarily under the bank's umbrella. Let's put it that way. I think he wrote Ripples, didn't he, Mike Rutherford?
Yes.
I believe. And, that shows that he was able to write an amazing tune, I think. And I think this is one of them. Burning Rope.
Burning Rope, yes. Opens with quite a bold kind of drum feel. I think his drums sound great on this album. They're really clear, and he's really going for it. His playing's great. Well, he's always good, Phil. Banks again said that he had to shorten this again. One for the Vine. He didn't want another One for the Vine track. I don't think Phil liked One for the Vine, did he? I think he had a few words about it. Or I may be wrong, but I mean, Rutherford's playing on this is pretty good, I'd say. There's a really good solo in there. Tony was a little bit critical of Mike Rutherford on this album. He said his guitar sound was a little bit thin, which is a bit, and he did make the comment. He said he'd have. Again, I'm going to make my point that the ghost of Steve Hackett. He said it would have been interesting to see what Steve Hackett could have done with the solos, because he sort of said he brought a finesse to the band. I actually, this is a conundrum I wanted to pose. Why didn't they recruit Daryl Stoermer from the live band into Genesis? I've got a quote here from Mike Rutherford. He said, well, the problem was he couldn't write, but then again, he couldn't play a wrong note if you paid him to. And as we were paying him, it worked out pretty well in the end. So I've kind of answered my own question. But having said all that, I think Mike Rutherford does quite a good job, and he was quite a good guitarist anyway. I mean, Tony and Mike were playing guitar, could play guitar, couldn't they, and I often wonder, if I think we've said this before, if Steve Hackett could have put aside his grievances, I think he would have fitted into this album, and I think he would have had some good contributions. And it's I always think it's a crying shame that he never did, really. He needed somebody to give him a damn good talking to, basically. But there you go. But yeah, I like this song. I think it's great. It's a good closer, actually, to side one. Very good.
I wonder if Ballad of Big was actually about Steve Hackett. He's haunting, he was killed by some natives, and then he haunted them from then onwards.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, I take your point. I think that they liked the writing dynamic between the three of them, didn't they? That's the sort of famous fact about this period.
Right.
They suddenly discovered that they could just sit around, the three of them, and have a laugh. I always think of Steve Hackett as being quite a sort of metaphysical person. I imagine him sort of sitting in the corner,
Crushing wine glasses.
Crushing wine glasses. yes, percussively, as we established last time. So I imagine him simmering, in the corner, a brooding presence, and the idea of inviting someone new in, I don't know whether they really needed it. I don't feel his absence especially keenly, although I do think his guitar playing is amazing, Steve Hackett. That's what that was his big contribution to Genesis, really, was all the original guitar sounds and feels and things, and some writing, but not, not enough for him, But we're going to spend this whole review discussing Steve Hackett, aren't we? Let's just go on to do the tracks. Burning Rope. So Burning Rope. Everybody loves this track, don't they? I knew that you would like it because this is one of the only sort of slightly experimental tracks on the album, actually.
Yeah.
So this is a harking back track, I think.
Yeah.
It could have been another One for the Vine, but that doesn't commend it to me because I don't actually like One for the Vine. I'm with Phil on this one. Sorry, Genesis fans, I know that's heresy, but I think One for the Vine is not a great prog track. But that's just me. And I think that there is a bit like I was saying before that Tony Banks sometimes does have the tendency, when he's left to his own devices and he's not writing in a band, to do pieces which are a little bit like writing exercises. His debut solo album, A Curious Feeling, demonstrates that to me. It's just kind of like a bit meandering, and a sort of lack of effective hooks. But when he does throw a hook in, it's really great. And this song, Burning Rope, I think is basically quite meandering. And I think the fact that it was more experimental actually makes it worse. Like, it should have been another short song, really. They didn't need any extra material for this album. It was so full up. The one bit of this track that I do appreciate, again, curiously, is based on a first inversion chord, but this time in the melody rather than the harmony. Here I go again. And the moon who seduced you. I like that bit.
Yeah.
But, and it's sort of almost worth waiting, listening to the whole track just for that bit. But there's, again, sorry to be pedantic, but I think there's a technical mistake in it because it's the da, da, da. So that's, again, it's a first inversion of the chord, but this time in the melody. But they should have done it twice, I think. They should have done da 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 da. Just stop that. But they didn't. They went da 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 da, which is boring. So I really have to sit through a lot of stuff that I dislike in order to get to the payoff in this track. Personally speaking. And I don't know, sometimes people, if you say, well, that's a technical mistake, people say, oh, well, that's just your opinion, but I don't think technical mistakes are a matter of opinion. I don't know if you've ever seen MasterChef, but it's like, you say, oh, this, you've burnt the milk here, but I like it like that. No, it's still wrong. You can't burn the milk, Anyway, sorry, I'll put that metaphor to one side. I find the chorus here a bit redundant again, and the double time middle section, which perhaps should have gone at the end. I think it's poorly structured as well. I don't think the finished structure for this track works. I can't really make sense of it. I think they could have dropped the last 2 minutes. That would have been a better edit. And I think this track almost sounds like, do you remember 12 Inches? Do you remember 12 Inches from the 1980s, where they started remixing all your favourite songs, but with loads of extra bits in that you didn't want to listen to? I think this is like a 12-inch of a quite what would have been quite a good single in other circumstances. And once again, I can't make head nor tail of the lyrics. Are they about Jesus? It's just, again, it's a sort of meandering series of lines. They could have they called it Burning Rope, but it could have been called anything, really. They could have taken any sort of couplet from the lyrics. No, what's the word? Any sort of syntagm from the lyrics and turned that into the title. Burning Rope doesn't seem to have anything really riding on it thematically here. Or if there is,
perhaps that's how they felt at that point in time. In the punk era, you're old and disillusioned now. We're old and disillusioned. This could have been their last album. After Wind and Wuthering, I think there's a lot riding on this album.
You think? Yeah.
And I think it was a our American friends would say it's a bunt in baseball.
Not a grand slam.
Not a grand slam. What would that
see?
be in cricket? It's in cricket circles. That'd be a single. I don't know. Instead of a 4. So anyway, that could be where it's coming from.
In cricket, it's when you have to run.
Yeah.
Instead of just standing still.
Yeah.
A 1 run.
A lot of standing still in cricket, isn't there?
It's a lot of standing still, yeah. So that's why people find it calming to watch. Unlike baseball, which is frenetic.
A lot of running.
Let's drop this topic. We're not experts. All right, good. Yeah, you're probably right about that. They couldn't have done another Wind and Wuthering, could they?
No.
Not that I'm bothered about that, but a lot of people would have been. Because you're right. If they'd done another Wind and Wuthering, that probably would have been the end, wouldn't it? Commercially. So they did take it. They did take a left turn here, as it were. I like it, but I can see why people, are uncomfortable with it. Anyway, let's plow on.
Yeah.
Let's plow on into The Motherlode.
Ooh. Nice.
What are your feelings on this track? We're on to side 2 now. Track 1.
Yeah, it's a great track to flip over, and I think you're rewarded with this. It's another Americana track, a story of the gold rush, and Go West Young Man apparently was there was a columnist called Horace Greeley who wrote in about 1865, "Go west, young man, go west and grow up with the country." So this will make an interesting song. I think there's some really good guitar work on this. I like this. I just said it's like a bit of a condensed prog track. It's quite rocky. They released it as a single in the US and Japan, so I think they must have, or the record company must have liked it. But yeah, I'll put aside my feelings of should they be writing about Americana when they come from, I don't know, Surrey, don't they, basically?
Yeah.
I really like it. It's a great track, great opener for side 2.
It is interesting that they did that, isn't it? Why did they bother? Yeah, it was sort of, was it a nod? It was like, we'll be over soon,
Yeah, it could be.
We're leaving Surrey.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's right. I mean, I think I've written this as another track that's Small Creeps Day ready. I'm sorry, I've definitely got to do a solo episode on this album because I'm such a big fan of Small Creeps Day. Yeah, I love this track as well. It's beautiful. I think they're barely putting a foot wrong for me at this point. I'm sorry, at this point in the album, I'm loving it. I'm loving it, loving it all. I just think this track's work. You're right. It's a condensed prog track in the sense that it's like a medley, isn't it? It's got this medley-ish in structure, but it's built around that opening theme, da 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 da, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just really beautiful, and you feel like when you hear that, it's like, yep, we got a track here.
Yeah.
Apparently, they thought that about Invisible Touch. When he played and Phil, there's a sort of existential sigh there I heard. And Phil said he seems to have an invisible touch, and they were like, yeah, we got a track. I wouldn't have said that about Invisible Touch, but I would have said that about this one. Just listen to this riff, brilliant. So yeah, lovely. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, there's not much else to say about it, really. You've said it, the thing about Go West Young, another song about the plains. Let's go on to Many Too Many. What are your feelings on this one?
I think this is, it's a sign of things to come. I think this is probably one of Banks's best sort of romantic pop rock songs. I prefer it. I better not say. I prefer it over some of their later output. I think it all works pretty nicely. I haven't got too much to say about it. It's got a nice sort of fuzzed out guitar sound on it from Mike, and I like it. I think it's pretty good, really. I mean, I don't know how well it did commercially. It wasn't the big hit of the album, was it? But I think it's all right. It's good.
Um, all right, yeah, good. Well, actually, I would a slight discrepancy here. This is the first track on the album that I actively dislike.
Right.
Right, I think it's all right. It's passable. It's quite short. You know, it's like a sort of attempt at writing a hit single, isn't it? I just can't really find anything in this one that's redeemable. You know, yeah, even Burning Rope, you know, if you're patient, has a sort of it's kind of vanishingly short hook. But there's no bits on this that I really particularly enjoy. It's called a torch song. Do they call it a torch song? You're holding a torch for somebody, you know, who's you know, an ex, basically. Um, perhaps this is sort of. I wondered whether also this was the precise point where a lot of fans of classic Genesis felt they've actually sold. They've sold out here, you know. Because this is really, they're not making any pretense of being progressive here at all, are they? This is just a pop song.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that. I like pop songs, you know. I'm not sure whether I really kind of buy the idea of selling out. I don't know what that wouldn't, you know. I think it's possible, but you'd have to be specific about what that meant. But I just don't think this is. I suppose I just don't think this is a very good song. Bit of trivia. This is the first use of "mama," isn't it, in a Genesis song? Yeah, it's one of those vocal licks that they keep coming back to in the future.
I quite like that bit where he does that.
Really, yeah. But is it? Do
Yeah.
you just think it's like the sort of comfort of recognition,
Maybe.
rather than actually being again interesting
Yeah. I
artistically?
think at the time, I agree. I think Genesis fans would have gone, "Oh, what's this? What's this crap? You know, I don't want to listen to this."
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know.
I always associate this track in my mind with "Fanfare for the Common Man" by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, because the videos of both songs. They seem to be standing in the same stadium.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically the same year almost. You know,
I mean,
so,
I was going to say because it's David Henschel is helping with the production work, and
right, yeah.
I always associate him with. I know you're not a big fan, but with Renaissance, because they had the album "A Song for All Seasons," I think it was out at the same time. And I really remember Northern Lights being out at that time, and that was a sort of a similar, you know, going from sort of classical to sort of poppy prog
yeah.
pop, I suppose. And that did well for them, but then their next album I think bombed, and you know that was the end of them, you know. So this is going back to Genesis, you know. They had slightly more success because they were probably better writers, I guess, you know. But
I think it just like Gentle Giant went poppy on one of their albums. What's it called? Giant for a Day, is it? Like they went all out pop, and it was like this is really terrible. Genesis never suffer from a total lapse of taste, you know, in that way. So I think there is something sort of salvageable about you know, songs like this, but this just doesn't happen to be one of my favorite. We should do a Renaissance album at some point. We should talk about a Renaissance album. I'd have to sort of like hold me nose. No, sorry Renaissance fans. We should discuss it because I'd be interested in sort of like returning to it. Let's do Scenes from a Night's Dream. Where do you stand on this one?
I'm not overly keen on this. It's a sort of novelty song, which, you know, Genesis do on occasion.
They do, don't they?
They do. So it's based on this Nemo character, which was a cartoon comic strip, Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. I think it was Winsor McKay, the cartoonist. Very popular turn of the century. And I think Phil was keen on the albums. That was another thing he collected, you know, these Nemo. But to be honest, I'm not really keen on this. I think I would have put The Day the Lights Went Out on instead, because I really like that. But again, maybe possibly didn't fit in with the album. But I just wanted to say what a good song that is, and a forgotten Genesis song. Bring it back.
Bring it back, yeah. That's a good thought, I think. But I actually quite like this one, "Scenes from a Night Dream." I have to say, I find this is a sort of a hark back Genesis lyric, sort of, because I think it's nursery rhyme-ish, you know.
Yeah.
I actually think this is one of the better lyrics on the album. It's medley-ish again, which is quite impressive, I think, in such a short song, 3.5 minutes. As you were saying before, sort of compact prog. And I think my favourite lick in it is where he goes, Nemo, get out of bed, bum 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 bum. I think that's a really cool arrangement point. And again, I think they're really thinking as a band here. I think perhaps, as I said earlier, one of the slight problems with this album is that they're writing more individually than as a band at this point. And I think when they're writing as a band, it's sort of more obvious, and I think it's more slightly more exciting to listen to. And this for me is one of those tracks where I think they're writing and arranging as a group, and I think it really works. That's just my feeling. Again, I've written another US reference because you got Washington's cherry tree. Chopping down the cherry tree in the garden. They can't leave it alone, can they?
No, and I think he was an American character, Nemo, anyway. So,
okay, it was an American cartoon, was it?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, so that might be why. Yeah. Okay. But still, I mean, there's plenty of good English nursery rhymes to choose from. I don't see why they have to choose an American one. Sorry, this is my chauvinism going out there. No, I'm joking, of course. So let's move on to Say It's All Right, Joe. What are your feelings on this one?
I'm not overly keen on the start of this track. I don't know why. It's a sort of torchlight confessional, and I think Phil sort of acted it out as the actor coming out and him on stage, and he had the hat and the Mac and sitting on a little table. But I think it's great when it gets going. That section, there were kings who were laughing in the rain, shine on. I really like that. I think that's brilliant. But I'm not sort of overly enamoured of the lead into it. But great when it gets going. And that's, I think, all I can say about it, really.
I think that's fair enough. We're really racing through these tracks, and I think it's because perhaps there's not too much to say about them, structurally and things.
Yeah.
In the way that you might talk at length about the structure of, Firth of Fifth or whatever it is. I think that our responses to these tracks are perhaps more immediate. I really like this one. I think you're right. I think when it picks up, it's great. But I also like, I quite like the sort of ballad bit. I think Mike Rutherford was on fire at this point. I think he's really confident in his writing at this point. Again, I think it's got a sort of ABAB structure, but it's essentially, again, medley-ish. But I just think all of it works as a totality. Again, what on earth is it about? And does it matter? I mean, maybe it doesn't matter. Somebody said it was about an alcoholic. I don't. It's got a reference to alcohol in, but I didn't see it as that myself. I felt like it was about the night before the end of a relationship. But I mean, again, who cares? I think it's more impressionistic, perhaps, this lyric. And actually, those kind of lyrics tend to work slightly better, I think, than ones that are more explicit, or specific. Now. Let me predict that you are going to say that you really like the Lady Lies, but I don't want to tread on your toes. Where do you stand on the Lady Lies?
Yeah, I do like this. Can I do my anecdote now, sir?
Yeah, you may.
Well, I think the Lady Lies is a sort of a farewell to their traditional sound. It's like a farewell to the fans. Here you go. We're not going to do this ever again.
Yeah. See you later.
See you later. And it's a bit like me. I liken being a Genesis fan, my own personal experience being a Genesis fan, that I'm on the Genesis bus from the pretty much from the start. Thanks to my big brother who brainwashed me. And I get up to about, and then there were three. After Trick of the Tail, it starts to tail off. I like certain aspects of Wind and Wuthering. This is going to be a rant. Sorry, I'll try and speed through it. I like aspects of Wind and Wuthering, but I really like, and then there was three. But the signs are there for me. I'm starting to. So I'm on a bus, and there's certain tracks. I start to look at my watch, and I start thinking, oh, I've got to get off soon. I've got to go shopping. Got to get off at the next stop. So I'm staying on for the whole of the album, and that's fine. And then by Duke, I've rung the bell, and I've stood up. I've got my rucksack, and I'm talking to the bus driver. And by the time Abacab comes along, I've got off the bus and I'm going to Tesco's. So that's my sort of life as a Genesis fan.
That wasn't an anecdote. That was an allegory.
Well, that whatever. Yes, you're right. But I could have been listening to them on the bus, couldn't I? You could
adapt that for the stage. That.
So I think this is a bit of a last blast of prog Genesis, to be honest. I think it's got some great moments. It's a bit like it's slightly quasi-mythical. It's in the sort of, I always think it's a bit like Fountain of Salmacis in some respects, because you've got this this sort of character who rescues a woman from I was going to say a monster from a woman, but it's a woman from a monster, and then the woman sort of entices him to some dastardly fate. I put 6 minutes 8 seconds. Joy, this track. I think there's some. It's got a slightly stripper-esque feel. I always think Tony Banks's keyboards on this. That.
Uh-oh.
On this track as well, when they're sort of playing out and it's fade. I know you're not keen on a fade out, are you? But to me, that's like Genesis have got on not a boat. They've got on not a bus. They've got on a boat. Sorry, completely cocked up. So they've taken the boat to Avalon and they're disappearing. But I think it's a great track, and for me, this is it. This is where I'm about to get off the bus after this song.
Right. We lost you there for a second, I think. You were talking, we got most of that, I think. As you were talking about Tony Banks's opening Moog salvo. It's supposed to be stripperly.
Stripper-esque.
Stripper-esque, right? Okay, yeah.
I've got a feeling there's some Mellotron on this album. I don't know if it's on this. It's not on this track, is it? But I think it's. I think it's the last time. It could have been, yeah. I forgot to mention that because that's the last time he ever uses one.
Yeah, right. Okay.
On a Genesis album.
I doubt he spent much time in strip clubs. Tony Banks. He doesn't seem the type.
He's not the type, is he? No. He's not the type.
All right, good. Well, look. He's not seductive, is it? That opening. It portends something rather sinister, but I suppose that's the point. This is the only this is the only prog song on the album, and it's not really very prog. I mean, actually, Burning Rope has a sort of prog-like structure as well, but it's more like an overcomplicated pop song. I think this is actually through composed, this track, and kind of sectional, not sexual, sectional, though it's supposed to be sexual on some level. I suppose Brian Wilson would have called it modular. So I think I identify with what you're saying about it being a bit more proggy, that, farewell, goodbye to all that, But I just think it's a little bit like, if we're done with that, then that's all right. That's okay by me, because their heart doesn't sound like he's in it anymore to me. This isn't one of their finer, modular tracks, I don't think. I think that... but you're right. It's got a classical sort of theme, hasn't it? Knight saving a lady, but the lady's really a monster, I think, or something like that. But I think musically, it's not one of my favourites. It's got a slight echo of the Lamb in the expansive Tony Banks keyboard solo section. I think that's the sort of the most superficially proggy thing about it, but it's not. It doesn't quite convince me, I'm afraid. Let's, without further ado, move on to Follow You, Follow Me. This would be an interesting one. We'll see which way this lands. This is the final track, of course, track 6, side 2. Now, where do you stand on this one?
I think this is an important track for the career of Genesis. because it's a romantic song. It, you know, Collins is getting into the lyric writing and so on, and I think it brings on board a female audience they never had before. Possibly without it, you know, it's a stepping stone for them in their career. Possibly without it, they may not have carried on. I don't know, but I probably didn't mind it when I was a kid, and you know, you actually saw them on Top of the Pops, but it's not really my cup of tea. I'm not really that keen on this track. Sorry, Genesis fans. I mean, we saw. Here's a little plug. Me and Peter went to a Genesis tribute night at Braintree in Essex, here in the good old UK, and Richard McPhail was there doing a book signing of his recent book. Sadly, he's passed away. This was actually just slightly before COVID, and Genesis did this, and you know, people were dancing to it, and I remember having a conversation with Peter. Well, Peter was talking to me because he was sort of critiquing the performance of the band during each song, and a Geordie bloke in front of us turned round and threatened to punch Peter if he didn't shut up. So it kind of reminds me of them playing this song, and it left a sort of unpleasant taste in the mouth. But
now that was an anecdote.
Yeah, that was an anecdote. But yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's not. I can take or leave it.
Okay. I mean, I think it works pretty well as an ending, actually. I think this is a happy ending I've written to the album. I don't think, again, it doesn't really matter to me too much whether this is a sellout or not, because I don't know whether I really recognise that term. I think that, you know, art is either good or bad, and it doesn't, you know, it's that's really what you're looking out for. I feel like it's. Did you notice that its structure is slightly similar to I Know What I Like? This is the sort of slightly more mainstream version of I Know What I Like, really. And I think if you're prepared to accept this, then you're prepared to accept anything from Genesis. No, I mean, you know, like it's like this is pointing the way forward, isn't it? It's got ethnic, let's say, even sort of Africanist percussion elements, a bit like I Know What I Like, you know. I mean, I'm not saying that's why people didn't like it, but it had something to do with it unconsciously. It feels like perhaps it's their least European track to date, this one. That was my thought on it. I think one of the reasons it's a sort of happy ending track is because of the lyric. I mean, this is quite an open-hearted love song, isn't it? You know, and of course, love is always the greatest happy ending. You know, is it a bit sentimental? Possibly, but you know, maybe love is sentimental to some extent, isn't it? You know, so it can be taken in more than one way. I think perhaps, you know, because again, you know, like love itself, if you're not directly involved in it, it can seem like something banal. If you are involved in it, it's the most wonderful thing. And perhaps you could say the same about this track. You know, the melody and the harmony are either wonderful or they're banal, depending on, you know, your sort of slightly depending on your point of view. You know, I think it's, well, again, like love itself, it's a matter of decision, is it not? But yeah, I don't have a problem with this track at all. I think it's a sweet, you know, ending. I think albums need good endings. And I think this to end the album on a hit single seems like a slight, almost like a cop-out. But I think it's perfectly legitimate, you know, as long as the song convinces you. And that, again, as I say, that's probably a matter of of decision. All right, good. Well, we've flown through this. My conclusion here is that, as I said at the beginning, is I think this is a less sort of experimental and progressive album, but I think it's full of good ideas. I think it's a really great rock album, this one. You know, whether it's one of the classic prog albums, you know, perhaps not. But I just think it's sort of a big bag of good ideas, really, this album, just presented in a slightly less experimental way. What would your sort of conclusion?
I think it's an important album for them, one that gets greatly overlooked. It's a bit of a mixed bag for my liking, but it's really probably the last album I'll freely listen to. I'll listen to Duke under a little bit of duress. I don't mind it.
And
You know,
then it's
and then
straight to
then
Tesco's.
it's straight to Tesco's. You know, I'm off. I do get on the bus occasionally, you know, to pop out and see friends, but I don't stay on it for long.
Are we still talking about Genesis?
No, I've got a bus to catch.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, thanks ever so much, Sean.
Okay, thank
you're
you.
going on holiday
I am
shortly, I think.
To deepest Sussex.
Deepest Sussex, right?
Yes.
Okay, nice. And I'll see you back in the fall. Let's no, I mean like I don't know, next month.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about our American listeners now. I'm going all
Yes.
Genesis. I'm thinking about the next American tour. Autumn, we call it in Britain. So yeah, I'll see you again soon. And thanks everyone for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Please give us a review if you can on the podcast, if it's not too much trouble. Obviously, it would have to be a 5-star review. If you're going to give us a 1-star review, better not to bother. And we'll see you on the next edition of Crapper, which should be next week, I think. So bye-bye, Sean.
Bye bye.
And goodbye from me, Tim. And we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.